What if a weapon that costs less than a luxury car could destroy a defense system worth hundreds of millions of dollars? In today's war in Ukraine, this is not a theory, it is reality. Every single day, Ukrainian factories now roll out nearly 3,000 drones. By the end of last year, that number had climbed to almost 1 million units. To put it in perspective, that is double the amount of artillery shells provided by the entire European Union in the same period. And these are not just surveillance tools. They have become kamikaze weapons, resupply machines, and psychological game changers that are reshaping the battlefield. On May 1st, Ukrainian drones penetrated deep into Crimea, bypassed Russia's impenetrable S-400 system, and turned radar stations into flaming wrecks. Just weeks later, another strike at Kurovsky base proved that even Russia's most advanced air defenses can be blinded and destroyed by swarms of cheap, expendable aircraft. This is not only a story of Ukraine versus Russia, it is a story of modern warfare itself. Because if billion-dollar missile shields can be neutralized by drones built with plywood and commercial parts, what does that mean for the future of national defense? Could the same tactics one day threaten America's own carrier groups or missile bases? Stay with me until the end, because every detail of this story will change the way you think about war, security, and the weapons of tomorrow. And before we dive in, let me know in the comments, do you believe drones will replace missiles as the dominant weapon of the 21st century? For centuries, warfare has been defined by big machines, tanks crushing through lines, jet fighters screaming overhead, and missile systems guarding the skies. But today, the quiet hum of a small propeller might be more terrifying than the roar of a jet engine. Drones have become the great equalizer of modern conflict. What makes them so disruptive is not just their ability to strike, but their affordability and accessibility. A single kamikaze drone can cost as little as $30,000. Compare that to the multi-million-dollar price tag of a Patriot interceptor missile or a Russian S-400 battery. This imbalance creates a paradox of war. The cheaper weapon can often defeat the expensive one. And that, to me, is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. We have seen echoes of this shift across the globe. In the Middle East, Houthi rebels used low-cost drones to cripple Saudi oil facilities in 2019, shaking global energy markets overnight. In the South Caucasus, Azerbaijani forces deployed Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2s in Nagorno-Karabakh, tipping the balance of power in weeks where traditional artillery had failed for decades. And now in Ukraine, we see the same story, only louder, larger, and closer to Europe's heart. Personally, what strikes me most is how these machines change not only tactics but psychology. Imagine being a soldier in a trench, knowing that at any moment a buzzing sound above could mean your last breath. Traditional warfare gave you a chance to see your enemy. Drone warfare feels invisible, constant, and relentless. It breaks morale as much as it breaks defenses. So when we talk about drones, we're not just discussing new gadgets. We're talking about a revolution that rewrites the rules of national defense and exposes vulnerabilities even in the most advanced armies. And this revolution did not begin in Ukraine, but it may reach its climax there. Which brings us to the next question: how did Ukraine, a country under siege, manage to turn garages and small factories into one of the most prolific drone industries on the planet? Let's look at how a wartime necessity became a national strategy. When the war first broke out, Ukrainian soldiers often relied on commercial drones, the same ones you might see hobbyists flying in a park. They strapped makeshift explosives to them, improvised with fishing lines and soda bottles, and turned toys into weapons of survival. It was desperate, it was messy, but it worked. That ingenuity became the seed of something much bigger. Fast forward 2 years, and Ukraine now produces close to 3,000 drones every single day. By the end of last year, their output had reached almost 1 million units. Think about that number for a moment: 1 million flying machines built not in decades, but in months. For me, it's one of the most striking examples of how necessity fuels innovation. When your country is fighting for survival, every garage, every workshop, and every university lab can become part of the defense industry. What fascinates me is how decentralized this revolution is. Ukraine didn't just depend on a handful of big defense contractors. Instead, hundreds of small startups, hobbyist groups, and even furniture factories retooled their production lines to make wings, propellers, and airframes. It's almost like a national crowdsourcing project, where everyone contributes a piece of the war effort. This reminds me of moments in history when nations under pressure turned scarcity into strength. During World War II, the United States mobilized car factories to build tanks and planes. In Britain, ordinary citizens melted down pots and pans to create raw metal for the war industry. Ukraine today is living through its own version of that story, but in the age of drones. And here's the strategic twist: by flooding the battlefield with cheap, expendable drones, Ukraine has found a way to outpace Russia's reliance on expensive interceptors. Every shot fired at a drone drains resources worth 10, sometimes 100 times more. It's a war of attrition, but tilted in Ukraine's favor. Personally, I see this as more than just military logistics, it's a cultural shift. When a society learns to innovate under fire, it doesn't just build weapons, it builds resilience, confidence, and unity, and that might be Ukraine's greatest weapon of all. But innovation doesn't stop at quantity. It also means creating specialized designs that can outmaneuver Russia's defenses. Which brings us to the heart of the story: the Beaver and the Shark, two drones that embody Ukraine's blend of creativity, engineering, and raw determination. Every revolution needs its icons. For Ukraine's drone war, two names stand out: the Beaver and the Shark. They may not sound like fearsome predators, but on the battlefield, they've become symbols of ingenuity and persistence. The Beaver, officially known as the UJ-26, is perhaps the most famous of Ukraine's kamikaze drones. At just over 3 meters in wingspan, with a body length of 2.5 meters, it doesn't look like much at first glance. Yet it carries a deadly gift: around 20 kilograms of explosives packed into a payload that can cripple advanced systems. What makes it truly remarkable, though, is its agility. With its unique forward and rear wing configuration, it can quickly shift altitude, dodging radar sweeps and anti-air defenses. To me, the Beaver feels like the embodiment of a scrappy fighter: light, nimble, and underestimated until it strikes. Then there's the Shark, the AQ-400, built from plywood and civilian materials. It is perhaps the best example of Ukraine's philosophy of cheap but effective. Costing as little as $30,000, it weighs just 100 kilograms and can fly up to 7 hours. Some even call it the disposable hero, because it doesn't need to survive its mission, it only needs to deliver its explosive payload. When I think about the Shark, I can't help but imagine carpenters and furniture makers in small Ukrainian towns shaping the wooden frames. Not for cabinets or chairs, but for weapons that will alter the course of battles. There's something deeply human and emotional in that transformation, every nail and plank carrying a story of resilience. Now, when we compare these drones to Russia's Shahed-136, imported from Iran, the contrast is striking. The Shahed is larger, louder, and often easier to detect, but it carries a heavier warhead. The Beaver and Shark, on the other hand, prioritize stealth, flexibility, and sheer numbers. From my perspective, this balance of quality versus quantity is what makes Ukraine's approach so disruptive. Instead of building one perfect weapon, they are building thousands of good enough weapons that overwhelm defenses through persistence. This is where strategy meets psychology. Imagine a radar operator in Crimea, watching his screen while dozens of small blips suddenly appear. He doesn't know which is the Beaver, which is the Shark, and which might just be a decoy. That uncertainty, multiplied night after night, becomes its own kind of weapon. And yet, as impressive as these drones are, their true power lies in how they are used together. It's not just about a single Beaver or Shark, it's about the swarm. the coordination, and the tactics that turn cheap machines into a billion-dollar headache for Moscow. Which leads us directly into the heart of the story: how Ukraine's drone swarms managed to outwit, overwhelm, and ultimately humiliate Russia's pride, the S-400 air defense system. For years, the S-400 was marketed as Russia's crown jewel of air defense. It was said to track targets hundreds of kilometers away, capable of spotting objects as small as a tennis ball. On paper, it was supposed to be unbeatable, the shield that would keep Russia's skies untouchable. But on a dark morning in Crimea, that myth came crashing down. 17 Ukrainian drones, 7 beavers and 10 sharks, rose into the night sky. They did not fly in a straight line, they split, climbed, and dipped, weaving a web of confusion. Some stayed low, skimming the earth at barely 30 meters. Others climbed just high enough to bait the radar. The strategy was simple but devastating: force Russia's defenses to look in too many directions at once. Inside the Kurovsky base, Russian operators watched their screens. The radar should have lit up with warning, but because of the drone's low altitude, the screens remained eerily blank. For me, this is one of the most chilling images of modern war: soldiers staring at their monitors, blind to the danger that is already screaming toward them. By the time the S-400 batteries realized what was happening, it was too late. Missiles worth millions of dollars shot into the sky, but without precise radar guidance. They either missed or self-destructed. Panzer systems tried to join the fight, firing frantic bursts at shapes in the dark. A few drones were destroyed, but most pushed through. And then came the moment of impact, explosions ripping through radar arrays, fire engulfing the launchers. A billion-dollar fortress, reduced to scrap metal in less than 15 minutes. To me, what makes this moment so significant isn't just the physical destruction, it's the symbolism. The S-400 wasn't just hardware, it was Russia's pride. Its deterrent, its way of telling the world, you cannot touch us. Ukraine touched it, and not with jets or stealth bombers, but with plywood drones powered by propellers. That inversion of power, the weak breaking the strong, is something history has always remembered. It reminds me of the Maginot Line in World War II, or the sinking of mighty battleships by aircraft. Every so often, a weapon hailed as invincible meets a tactic it was never designed to face. And this isn't only about Russia. It's a warning to every military on Earth. If the S-400 can fall, then no air defense system is truly safe from creative tactics and relentless innovation. That thought alone should keep generals awake at night. But Ukraine's story doesn't end here, because while homemade drones proved their worth, the country also turned to one of the most famous unmanned systems in modern warfare, a Turkish creation that had already rewritten the rules in other conflicts. Let's turn now to the Bayraktar TB2 and see how it became Ukraine's eye in the sky and a sword against Russia's fleet. Before Ukraine, the Bayraktar TB2 had already made its name on the world stage. In the mountains of Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijani forces used it to devastating effect in 2020. Armenian tanks and artillery, once considered immovable, were turned into burning wrecks by precise strikes from above. That war was short, but it showed the world that drones could shatter decades of stalemate in just a matter of weeks. So when the TB2 arrived in Ukraine, it carried a reputation, and it did not disappoint. With a wingspan of 12 meters and the endurance to stay aloft for more than a full day, the TB2 was not a toy or a disposable kamikaze. It was a hunter, carrying smart munitions like the MAM-L, designed to glide silently and strike with surgical accuracy. To me, the TB2 feels like a patient predator, circling high above, unseen, waiting for the exact moment to strike. One of the most dramatic moments came in June of 2025. A Russian landing ship, carrying 30 soldiers, moved quietly toward the Kherson coastline. What the crew didn't know was that a TB2 was already tracking them from more than 5 kilometers above. Instead of flying directly overhead and risking detection, the drone traced wide arcs, always staying just beyond radar range. Yet its cameras never lost sight of the target. At the command station, Ukrainian operators watched the ship in real time. Hours passed. Finally, when the vessel entered a vulnerable position, the order came. A MAM-L missile detached from the drone's wing and streaked toward the ship at 250 meters per second.
Proceed with the strike
Seconds
now.
later, the Black Sea erupted with fire and steel. The ship was crippled. Its mission ended before it began. I remember seeing that footage for the first time. And what struck me wasn't only the explosion, it was the calm precision. No roar of jets, no thunder of artillery, just a silent eye in the sky and one well-placed strike. It felt almost like a new kind of warfare, one that is as much about patience and data as it is about firepower. And here's where the TB2 becomes more than just a machine. It represents trust between nations, Turkey providing technology, Ukraine adapting it to their own needs, and the operators who must make split-second decisions knowing each shot could change the battle. To me, that mix of technology, alliance, and human judgment is what makes the TB2 such a powerful symbol in this war. But if the TB2 showed us what a medium-sized, high-end drone can achieve, Ukraine's cheaper drones, the Beavers and Sharks, proved that swarms of low-cost machines could break the backbone of even the most advanced defenses. Together, they raise one larger question. What does this drone revolution mean for the future of global security? Not only in Ukraine, but for every country preparing for tomorrow's wars? When we look at Ukraine's skies today, we are not just seeing a regional conflict, we are glimpsing the future of war itself. Cheap drones battling billion-dollar defenses, plywood wings outsmarting radar arrays, and swarms of propellers overwhelming systems designed to stop fighter jets. To me, it feels like we are standing at the edge of a new era. One where the balance of power can shift with nothing more than creativity, persistence, and a handful of engineers. The lesson is as old as history. Every great fortress eventually meets a weapon it was not built to resist. The Maginot Line fell to blitzkrieg. Battleships fell to aircraft. And now, high-tech missile shields are being humbled by buzzing machines that look more like oversized model planes. That realization should not just concern Russia, it should concern every nation, including the United States. Because if an S-400 can fall in Crimea, what does that mean for our carriers in the Pacific? Or our Patriot systems guarding cities in the Middle East? Personally, I find this both inspiring and unsettling. Inspiring, because it shows how innovation can come from unlikely places, garages, workshops, even furniture factories. Unsettling, because it means the battlefield of the future will not only belong to those with the deepest pockets, but to those who adapt the fastest. In that sense, Ukraine's drone revolution is not just a military story, it is a reminder to all of us that resilience, creativity, and courage can rewrite the rules of survival. And as much as drones have changed the present, they are only the beginning. Artificial intelligence, autonomous swarms, and electronic warfare will define what comes next. The war in Ukraine may be the first great drone war, but it will not be the last. So here's my challenge to you. How do you think this technology will reshape the 21st century? Will drones replace missiles as the dominant weapon? Or will new defenses rise to counter them? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear your perspective. And if you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me through this story. If you found value here, consider liking this video, subscribing for more deep dives into the realities of modern warfare, and sharing it with a friend who cares about where the future of security is heading. Because the battles fought over Ukraine's skies today may shape the conflicts that define our tomorrow.